Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for February 9th, 2023. Today I'm going to concentrate on four breaking developments, each of which is of quite great significance given the overall strategic crisis that we're facing. Let's start with the visit of Zelensky to London, Paris, and Brussels. The Ukrainian president is on a mission to get more weapons, to shore up support for his beleaguered country, beleaguered army, and was greeted by none other than King Charles, Sunak, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who considers himself to be the Prime Minister in waiting. And then in Paris, he met with Scholz and Macron. His message is, give us more. We need more. To win this fight, he said, we need fighter jets, long-range precision missiles, tanks, and more. Now, the story is that the British said they would provide sophisticated fighter jets, and they're putting pressure on the United States to do so. The British did the same thing with tanks to force the United States to put pressure on Germany to release the Leopard tanks. It's clear for those who still haven't figured it out that the Brits are in the lead in this confrontation of NATO with Russia. Back in May 20th, in fact, 2022, Malcolm Chalmers, one of the leaders of the British think tank, the Royal United Services Institute, called for what he said would be a Crimean missile crisis. They would force Russia to back down due to the bombardment and attacks on Crimea. And this has been a consistent theme among British think tankers and others. And the reason for providing the fighter jets and long-range precision weapons is to be able to hit Crimea and pound it, pound it, pound it. That's what they're saying. In the absence of an ability to win the war on the ground, they're trying to use the Crimea situation to provoke the Russians to either back down or expand the fighting, possibly with tactical nuclear strikes and so on. So this is a terrible escalation in which Zelensky was sent forward to meet with the Brits and to push this scenario ahead. Now, the second breaking development is a really fascinating one. The very well-known and respected American investigative journalist, Seymour Hersh, has written an article, which is a detailed report confirming that the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. He writes that Biden gave a green light for this, that a team was set up under National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, which included the Joint Chiefs, it included CIA, State, and Treasury, and they had support from Denmark and Norway. This was to use Navy divers to plant C4 explosives on the pipelines. And this was done in the June 2022 Balt Ops 22 military exercises. That provided the cover for the divers to go down and plant the explosives. The remote detonation was done on September 26, 2022. Now, Hersh has quite graphic details of the discussions that went on and the importance to keep this classified because of the fear that it could trigger World War III. Helga Zeplar responded to this by issuing a demand yesterday for a full investigation of Hersh's revelations in the Bundestag, the German parliament. She said the U.S. must be held accountable for actions which have attacked the standard of living of all Germans and economic stability of the country. And as soon as I have this statement translated in English, we'll be posting it on our LaRouche Organization website. But what Hersh's article demonstrates is the absolutely evil state of mind behind the war hawks and this obsessed war faction, which not only accepts the destruction of necessary infrastructure, including infrastructure of their allies, but of their willingness to risk World War III, which could become a nuclear war. So I will provide a link to the Hersh article, and I think what you'll find is that it's a very compelling argument that it was the United States, certainly not Russia, that blew up the pipelines. Now, there's another lengthy article. This is the third breaking development, which is in the Columbia Journalism Review, which is one of the authoritative magazines or publications on reviewing writings by journalists and important stories. This is a well-respected journal, and the article is by a respected investigative journalist named Jeff Gerth. Gerth worked for the New York Times for a number of years. That's significant because in his article, he exposes the corrupt coverage of the New York Times and the Washington Post of Russiagate and their attacks on Trump and Putin. The article is titled "The Press versus the President," and it's over 20,000 words, so it's very long, very detailed. Now, it's not necessarily a defense of Trump, but devastating reporting on the fraudulent nature of Russiagate and the coverage of the Trump administration in relationship to Russia. He details collusion between government agencies beginning under Obama, the FBI, the CIA, and others, in targeting Trump with the Russian allegations. This then went through the Clinton campaign, and the Clinton campaign made sure it got out in all the major media. The media self-reinforced the lies of each other. One reporter would put out a so-called anonymous source report, and others would then pick it up as though it were absolute fact. This was a constant revolving self-reinforcement that Gerth is reporting. And Gerth goes on to say that no matter that these lies were exposed, they were constantly repeated, including the biggest lies, and they're still repeated. And those who contest these stories, these fabrications, are called conspiracy theorists. For example, you still hear it today, the lie that Adam Schiff just spouted last week, that Russia hacked the Clinton campaign and the DNC computers. This is an absolute disproven lie. But Schiff keeps repeating it, and the media keeps covering it. The lie that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to elect Trump, there's no truth to it. The cover-up of the role of the Clinton campaign in creating, along with the CIA, and one of the weaknesses in the article so far is it doesn't go into the British side of this. Nevertheless, it shows that the Russiagate story was a fabrication that the U.S. major mainstream media, in particular the New York Times and the Washington Post and CNN, covered repeatedly. So that, I think, is quite significant. You put that together with the Hersh expose on the Nord Stream pipelines, and this is a real blow to the credibility of the lying administrations of the United States. Now, finally, I have an update on yesterday's story that I did about the murderous effect of the U.S. government refusing to lift sanctions on Syria in the midst of this tragedy involving the earthquake that's struck Turkey and Syria, but especially with Syria, with children starving, children freezing to death, with an inability to provide aid because of sanctions. People are dying because of this. And the U.S. government has doubled down on their insistence that the sanctions must stay in place. Now, one man who's a Syrian living in Canada wrote a comment on the Facebook post yesterday of this story. And he said that he had set up a GoFundMe account to provide aid for people in need. And the GoFundMe account was shut down, citing U.S. sanctions of the Treasury Department as the reason for shutting down the account. This is criminal on top of criminal. Now, he included in his post the message from GoFundMe, but it appears now to have been deleted by Facebook. At least I couldn't find it. And if he's listening, post it again, because people need to see that this is the policy of the government to kill innocent children in Syria through a sanctions policy, which has already killed people, but to escalate the sanctions or to continue the sanctions at a time of this earthquake shows the absolute demented evil mindset of the people running U.S. foreign policy. Now, for those who posted messages of support for what I condemned yesterday, this murderous sanctions policy, keep speaking up. We can't let this drop. As I said, this is a brutal indication of the commitment of this network running the U.S. government to not just commit genocide, but to escalate the war against Russia. And this, again, with Zelensky's trip and so on, this makes the February 19th march in Washington even more critical than ever. And we'll keep posting information on the February 19th march. In the meantime, spread the word. There has to be an open, outspoken opposition to these policies. I think we're gaining the upper hand. The Hersh article, the Girth article, we're beginning to get the story out more broadly than ever before. So join us in this fight. And tomorrow is Friday. I'll be taking your questions. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com.